The function of a tree is that there's osmosis with the trees supplying liquids and moisture for the upper branches of the tree and the leaves. And there's photosynthesis where the tree supplies sugar energy to the roots to keep them fresh and alive. Of course, the tree does other things as well. For example, I remember being surprised watching Richard Feynman, a physicist, giving a speech where he pointed out that most of the mass of a tree doesn't come from the ground. It's not like it eats food from the ground, and that's why the tree gets bigger, like we eat food as children and we grow bigger over years. Most of the mass of a tree comes from it absorbing carbon dioxide from the air, and then it just adds that to the mass of itself. But the main function we're aware of with a tree is osmosis and photosynthesis. So when I started to notice that everything has a tree structure, even cracks in plates, and I thought streets have tree structure as well. But then it started to get pretty freaky when I started to notice not only do we have similar branching structure in our information systems and our body and the streets and the buildings and highways to trees, but there's actually some similarity in function too. So think about it. Let's look at this subway map here. And all around this subway map was huge apartment buildings. Korea has lots of high-rise apartment buildings. And they're not like depressing high-rises you might get in London, for example. They're actually really nice because each unit, each apartment has a family. And Korean families are very homogenous, not just racially, but almost every family I ever met in Korea, I almost never met a single parent family. They're all two parents families. And almost every single family had two children. Not three, not one, not five, exactly two. Part of that's because of government policies that encourage it that way. But so, you can get a small area like this and it could just be, it could have 100 high-rise buildings with 20 or 30 stories and just so many families in there. And yeah, it's a nice area. I loved Korea. And so it occurred to me one day that all these people, they're like the roots of a plant, right? So the plant supplies water, life-giving water to the upper branches of the tree. So all these people, just like the water in the ground, they're all in their individual apartments, right? And they're all growing and developing and studying and enjoying family life and nurturing. And then every morning, what do? They leave their apartments individually and they go down the little alleyways and small streets. And then they see other people going to work as well, doing the same thing. And then these trickles of water, they start to converge like the water coming down a mountainside in small rivulets. And they converge until they get into bigger streets like this one. And then they converge more until they get to the main road. And then often in big cities, you see just huge crowds of people heading for the subway station. And then this subway station have different branches, just like the roots of a tree. And then they all enter through those converging branches until they all converge onto the subway train, the platform, and get on the train. And then the train, just like the trunk of a tree, goes along the trunkway on the underground channel. Or it could be buses, or it could be planes, or it could be any way to get to work. So, or it could be their own cars on the motorways. So using the subway analogy, all the people come on there and they all go there. And then when they get to their destination, they disperse. And they first disperse in big crowds onto the bigger streets, and then they find where their offices or their factories or their shops or whatever their work they do is. They disperse in smaller and smaller, and they spread out just like the water does at the top of a tree, go to their offices and their companies. And then what they do is they work all day to create products and services. And then those products and services get traded for things. And then at the end of the month, they get their salary, money. And then what do they do with those salaries? They all leave their office or the factory or the shop at the end of the day on payday. And then they all converge back again, just like the branches of the tree with the leaves collecting the sunlight and the sugar starch. And then they all converge again and they all come back down the trunk and then they reach this station and then they all go out of their individual exit, whatever their exit is, and then they diverge more and more and more until finally they're on a side street where there's just a few of them, and then they reach their individual apartments and go inside and diverge more. And the money they bring back enables their family to be healthy and to live and to take care of their children and to have a nice home and to have enough food and even leisure, do things for leisure. And so it's really, this structure is not just like the tree where it's converging at the roots and diverging at the branches, where they converge in the apartment blocks and all come into the subway station and go to work and diverge at the destination and go to the offices. But what they take with them is their skills and their labor and their hard work and their knowledge. And then they deliver that, and their companies create fruit, right? This fruit is like the product of their labor or their design or intelligence or whatever it is they do at their company. And then conversely, the company receives from its customers or whoever it deals with money for its services or its goods and distributes them. And all that money gets sent back down the trunk along the subway line back to the individual families to revitalize the families. So it's fascinating that the way human life works is we just organically created these branching structures, diverging and converging branching structures that just happen to map onto what we see in trees or biological systems or galaxies or tiny little particles. And it's just a similar, even though every single one is unique and different in different certain ways, they all conform to this similar branching structure, or most things do, converging and diverging. And it depends which way you look at it, because if you start at the top of the tree and you track it down with your eye, everything's converging and it diverges when it gets to the roots. But if you look at the bottom where the roots are, everything's converging, going up the trunk and diverging. So the words converge and diverge are actually subjective in that sense. But it is interesting how we see the same functional principle that we see in trees as well. And it's not just on a localized level. It's also true on a national level. Let's see if I can. Let me just. Oh yeah, this is on hereditary maps. We also see a branching structure, right? We see converging and diverging. Like all your great grandparents, which are 8, and then their children became 4. Your grandparents, their children became 2, and their children became you. And then if you get married and have children, you might have 2 or 3 children, and then you have 5 or 6 or 10 grandchildren and 20 or 30 great grandchildren. Again, the converging and diverging. I'm going to get back to that. What is this one? This is a language map of all the different languages in Europe. This is an evolutionary tree. But if I can just, to make that point, information systems. Yeah, I'm going to come back to that point in it. Here it is. This is what I was looking for. So actually, this is the flight path. Again, we get that same networking branching structure. So it's interesting. It's interesting that I was talking. Oh, okay. This is a subway map of what London would look like if it was represented, how the lines actually work. Again, the branching and trends of the structures. There's Europe. These are different animal types. We don't just have flora and fungi and flora. We have all sorts of animal types. Again, the branching structure. It's everywhere. This is I took this picture outside Hyde Park. They're installing fiber optics. Yeah, so this is a great picture. So this is a port with container ships. So I talked earlier about how people are like the roots of a tree. They all go to the subway station. They all go along the trunk. They all branch out then to the offices and provide the lubrication for the company, like the water. And then they get the analogous to starch, sugar starch. They get the celery, and that comes back down to the roots where it can take care of everything that's to do with the roots and keep the whole system going. But on a national level, it's also true. So if a company makes a product, the company on a national level or on a company-wide level will also. So the example I just gave was like individuals working for the company, but now each company in a country becomes like one node or one branch of the roots, and each company contributes products. If you think about it, do I have a pencil? Yeah, I have a pencil here. Let's take, for example, this. This is a great example. I love this example. It's just a pencil, right? How simple can it get? It's not going to focus because it's got facial recognition software. But how simple can a pencil be? But let's imagine in one country, there's one company that they make pencils. And actually pencils, they require a lot of companies just for a pencil to come into existence. So you need the company that provides the wood, you need the company that provides the graphite in the middle of the pencil, you need the company that does the shaping of the wood, another company probably shapes the graphite once they get the raw materials. The pencil's painted, so you need a company to do the chemicals that make the paint, then a company that makes paints and provide paints. Then you got like a printing company to print the pencil brand on there. Then another company probably does the dipping. And then some of those licensed companies will do those aspects, but eventually they'll all converge like the roots, different aspects of a product. Imagine how complicated a phone must be with thousands of companies, not millions maybe, but thousands of companies that do different things. And slowly they all converge in the supply chain and they all come together. And then a company like Apple or the pencil manufacturing Acme Pencil Company, they do the kind of final stages where they just put it all together and package it. And then so you've got your final product, which is something like a pencil, right? And then I'm not saying every container here is full of pencils, but this is a basic idea. And then this country exports pencils. It's the number one country to export pencils in the world. And so they then converge all those products. One of the containers might be full of pencils, another might be full of Samsung phones, another might be full of hats. It could be anything. And then that's the produce of this country. And then they go on the ocean for a few thousand miles. So now we've got all the people working in the offices and factories making stuff, all converging. And then you reach the port. That's like where the tree breaks free of the ground, and then just has, for a while, it just has the trunk. And then it goes onto the ocean, maybe 3,000 or 4,000 miles to Los Angeles in the port there. And then when it gets to that port, what happens to all those containers? They all got removed. Let me just big this up so I know what's coming next. They all get removed from the container ship. And then I don't think this is going to be a good representation, but once they get removed from the Ever Given. That's a coincidence. Isn't that the one that got stuck in the Panama Canal? I've had this picture for years, but I just realized it is the one that got stuck in the Panama Canal. Oops. Anyway, so they once they arrive and they get taken off the ports, this is a different meaning, this map, but I'll use it as an example. So they're in San Francisco or LA, and then the produce gets taken off and split up. Some of it will go to Washington, some of it will go to Phoenix, some of it will go to Denver. And in big amounts, they'll be shipped on trains or wherever to those ports. And then they'll get split up again, and some will go to different suburbs, like stations where they supply the local supermarkets. And then they'll get split up even further, and then they'll be sent to the supermarkets, and then the supermarkets will stock them, and then people will come into the supermarkets and buy them in small quantities, and then they'll get split up even further until they reach their final destination point, which is somebody's house or some student's backpack or some school or some office using pencils and other products. And so then we've seen all this converging root system in an economy, in a country, where all these products come together. Then they go along a trunk system, and then they branch out and spread out, go to the final destination. And then what happens is the person who bought the pack of pencils in a shop, they hand over $10 or $5, and then all that money starts to converge. Just like the sugar starch that leaves manufacture from converting sunlight, it all starts to converge, and then all that money, everybody gets their cut, and all that money goes to the people that received it in the port. Everybody gets paid off along the way, and then finally, of course it happens with wire transfer these days, but finally the money goes to the country of origin. And then the big company gets the big payment for selling all the pencils or whatever they're selling. But then they have to pay their suppliers. And the suppliers have to pay their suppliers. And their suppliers have to pay their suppliers until eventually there's no more suppliers because you got to the foundational level. And then those final suppliers have to pay all their employees. And so their employees then get on the subway or the bus or whatever and go home and use that money to take care of their family. So again, even on an international level, we're seeing that kind of same roots and branch structure level, not just the structure, but also the function of one side providing goods and the other side providing money. You can use the analog of water or sugar charge interchangeably again. So yeah, I just find that quite fascinating.